The video today is just a brief one that might be helpful if you're a learner with a test coming up. What we're going to think about today is 10 tips for L tests. It's not so much about driving skills, but some of the attitudes, some of the things you should be thinking about perhaps as you approach your test and on your test. So 10 tips then for L tests. First of all, it might be a good idea not to tell anyone. Number one, don't tell anyone. Right, lots of my pupils, particularly the young ones, will tell their friends, tell their parents, tell their family. And of course, you're just going to increase the pressure on yourself, because if you should fail, or indeed whilst you're out on the test, if you worry about what your friends and family are going to think, it's putting extra pressure on. Now I understand some of my pupils feel comforted by that. They like their friends to know, they like their mum to know. And so it's a personal choice, of course. But it can put extra pressure on you if all your friends are waiting to find out how you've done. It might be nice if you told no one and then just turned up with your pass sheet afterwards and said, look what I've just got today. So that's number one. Number two, try not to compete with friends and relatives. I find that if I get brothers and sisters perhaps both learning at the same time, one of them, if not both of them, tends to race the other, and it can actually affect your drive on the test. Strange to say, if you're in a hurry to pass your test because you want to beat your brother or your sister or maybe a friend at college or whatever, you might just find yourself driving too fast. I've had this with pupils learning. I had a couple some years ago, a brother and a sister, and he was very good, very, very quick to learn. She was okay, but she wasn't as quick as he was. They were not having set lessons at the same lesson together. They were not sitting in together, but they would often have a lesson on the same day. And he was racing ahead, and she was doing all right, but she wasn't as quick as him. And it was obvious to me that that was a great concern to her, that she should be keeping up with him or doing better. And because she was in such a hurry, she kept spoiling things, and we had to keep doing them over and over because she was rushing. And it's strange to say that the more you rush, the longer it's going to take. If you've ever played a musical instrument, I used to play the drums years ago, you would have to practice the scales or whatever it is, the drum rolls. You practice them slowly first, and as you get good at it, you pick up speed. And it's the same learning to drive. If you just rush it, and you will rush it if you're competing with people, it's going to take longer. But that's really the lead up to the test rather than the test itself. The examiner is looking for safety, point number 3. The examiner is looking for a safe drive. So keep that in mind. Imagine when you're out on your test perhaps that you've got the examiner's children in the back, and he wants to see if you can drive them safely to school. Safety is the critical thing on the L test, not looking for finesse like an examiner on an advanced test would be. Is looking for a safe, competent drive. Point number 4, you'll see the examiner writing from time to time, even if you're not scoring any minor faults, or driving faults as they're now called. He's going to make certain notes on his paper. In the past I've seen examiners just mark the top of the sheet every time they pull the pupil over to the side of the road. You will get pulled up to the side of the road several times maybe, and he might just mark that on the top of his paper. Well, you could worry about that, but it's not a fault, it's not a driving fault. Sometimes they might put a dot maybe by the side of something that they want to look at later, or maybe they might made their mind up whether it should be treated as serious or not. I've seen them do that. I've also seen them memorise the faults and write nothing, all the way to the very end. Memorise the faults, and then you get to the test centre, tick, 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 you've got 4 minors or 5 minors or whatever it is. So don't worry about the fact that they're writing. You may make a mistake, it might be a minor mistake, but if you think it's a big mistake, you're going to make another one. We'll come back to that in a minute. Number 5, drive as you were taught to drive. Don't drive more slowly to the examiner more quickly for the examiner. Drive as you were taught to drive. Drive as though you'd got your instructor in the passenger seat alongside. I had a lady many years ago and she failed twice, and I couldn't understand why, because she was good enough. So I sat in the third test and we were crawling around the test route. And I said, why were you driving so slow? She said, I was driving slow for the examiner. I said, well, don't do that next time. Drive as you would drive for me. And then she passed. So treat the examiner as you would your instructor. There's another old wives' tale as well, and the number of times I hear this. You're often told you must set your middle mirror wonky so that you have to lean over so that you can just see that you're using your mirror. There's no need for that. Set your mirror correctly so that you've got minimum movement of your head, that you can just glance with your eyes and see what's going on behind you. There is no need to set a wonky middle mirror so that he can see you moving about. In my car and lots of other instructors' cars, there's an eyeball mirror over in the top corner. You can't see it in here because it's behind the camera, but over in the top corner, and you might turn that round and he can see your eyeballs. And when he asks you to turn, at the moment he asks you to make a turn, at that moment he's looking in the eyeball mirror at your eyeballs to see whether you're glancing. There's no need to move your body about at all. That's just nonsense. You may make a mistake. It might only be a minor mistake. So if you make a mistake, try not to dwell on it. Put it behind you as soon as you can. Because if you do dwell on it, the chances are you'll make another one. You might stall, for example. But the point is, if you sort that out quickly, it might just go down as a driving fault. If you worry about that, the chances are within 5 minutes you will make another fault, and the next one could be serious. This is perhaps the hardest thing to do, really. Of the 10 points, this is probably the hardest. If you make a mistake, try not to dwell on it, because if you do, there's a great chance you're going to make another. I see this all the time when I'm teaching. Also, particularly when it comes to roundabouts, listen to the examiner. What I've found, and this is connected with it, if a pupil makes a mistake and they worry about that mistake, it's almost like they've gone deaf. I'm talking, but they can't hear me because they're worried about the mistake they've just made. So that's another reason why you shouldn't worry about any mistakes that you make. But it's very important, particularly on roundabouts, to listen to exactly how the examiner describes the turn. For example, you might be coming to a roundabout and the sign, the plan board as we call it, will show the second exit as straight ahead. But the examiner might say to you, at the roundabout, go straight ahead, it's the second exit. Or follow the road ahead at the roundabout, it's the second exit. Sorry, you might say go right at the roundabout. The plan board might show straight, but the examiner calls it a right. Well, in that case, you position for the right, you place on a right, you put on a right signal. You do what he tells you to do. If you think a junction is on the right and he thinks it's straight on and he says to you, follow the road ahead, second exit, then treat it as a straight on. If he says turn right, you think it looks like a straight, but he says it's right, it's a right. Whatever he says is what you do. That's important. You must listen, especially at roundabouts. They will often say it's exit number 1, it's exit number 2, it's exit number 3. As a general rule, exit number 3 is on the right, but it could be straight on. So you must listen, especially at roundabouts, to the examiner. And also, I always say to my pupils that hesitancy is better than haste. You might come to a busy roundabout maybe, you might get a very busy roundabout, and you might be worried that if you leave it too long, you're going to fail and then rush and slow down the traffic on the right. If you do that, you will fail. It is better to risk a minor fault for being a bit slow getting away than it is to rush out, because that will cost you, that will be a fail. You will be taught, I'm sure, by your instructor, if in doubt, don't pull out. If you don't know, don't go. The test centre where I take most of my pupils, Gallods Green, is not far from here. Within 3 or 4 minutes of coming out of Gallods Green, you've got a busy road, a very busy road. It's a T-junction, you emerge, you might be taken right, you might be taken left. And sometimes you have to wait a little while there because it can be very busy traffic coming particularly from the right. And you might worry and think, it's going to fail me if I stop here any longer. Just wait for your space. The space will come. The space will come. Wait for it. But be careful, of course, when it's there that you take it. But be careful not to be hasty, don't take any risks. Hesitancy is better than haste. Hesitancy might get you a minor. Over the course of a test, it might get 2 or 3 minors, but one haste will cost you the test. That's number 9. And finally, number 10. Follow the speed on the car. That's on the speedometer, not on the sat-nav. Strictly speaking, the sat-nav is more accurate, but the examiner is looking at the speed on your speedometer. So don't use the speed when you're watching what your speed should be. Don't use the sat-nav, use the speed on the car, because that's what you'll be marked on. The same with speed limits. Try not to rely on speed limits on the sat-nav, because they're not always up to date. Sometimes I've found in my TomTom, which is the same as the examiners use, the speed limits are not right. You must look for signs. You must follow the signs for speed limits. Don't rely on your sat-nav. Talk these things over with your instructor by all means, but I think those 10 things might be helpful. Thanks for watching.